Please join with me in the spirit of this reading. Reading this morning is from a former DRE of ours who went on to become DRE of Church of the Larger Fellowship, Lynn Unger. The poem is called Fools. I am looking for a few good fools, not idiots, though Lord knows those are thick on the ground. I mean proper fools, the court jester who speaks truth to the king, the tarot card fool who dances blithely, little dog at his heels on the edge of a cliff. Of course, the chasm is real and more dangerous than you can imagine. Famine and drought, corruption and greed, war and genocide, it's all there. Which is why I'm looking for fools. Fools who know how to juggle not just balls, but possibilities. Who can keep incompatible ideas simultaneously aloft. Fools who step lightly, who dance because their feet are tired and there are rocks in the road. Fools who know that sometimes the only way to find a new path is by getting lost. I'm not saying the job is easy. Bumps and bruises are assured, and the pay is literally a joke. Still, the work is not without its rewards. The view from the cliff is extraordinary, and the company divine. Who doesn't want to journey in a cloud of laughter? And what on your full agenda is so much more important? You know you want to join the merry band. Here is your badge. Commence. I want to start this morning with a confession. I am a foolish man. I should tell you that I've become a little more accustomed during that somewhat deliberate pause after my foolish confession for the room to erupt in a roar of rebuttals and deafening cacophony of testimonies in my defense, but that's okay. In fact, I take a little pride in my foolishness, even when it's taken for granted or assumed. I've been working hard to hone my foolish skills, but still, I am often insecure about being a fool because I fear it isn't enough. The world is dying from seriousness. Too many egos feeding off the humiliation and suffering of others. We are losing our ability to laugh, especially at ourselves, and the healthy sense of humility that is at the core of resilient community. Friends, we are losing our capacity for big joy. Now, I realize that's a rather strange statement to hear on Easter Sunday. I mean, Easter Sunday literally is joy incarnate, right? The revelation that all of our hope, the basket into which we have placed all of our eggs, is not only restored after being stolen and desecrated, but it is bigger and better than we even imagined. It is ever present and transcendent. It is timeless. It is big joy. But I keep asking myself, if Easter has come and the stone rolled away and love and joy incarnate is risen, why are there still so many people dying in Gaza? Why is Ukraine and the Sudan and Yemen and Venezuela and Ghana, why are the Balkans still under constant attack? And why are there so many mass shootings still? And people who are hungry and unhoused? Why is there a penchant for people in power to lie and deceive the people that they lead? Now, don't get me wrong, I love Easter. It's one of the very best stories we have to remind us about what the world needs. It is, after all, the arrival of big joy, but with all the suffering around us, we need a bigger big joy. So let me be so bold and foolish to this morning talk about how to build an Easter from scratch. And the first thing you always need for such a phenomenal cultural resurrection is a fool, someone like Jesus. Now let me pause here and acknowledge how many different beliefs we have in the room and online. We're all believers of something, even if it's not the same thing, and I want to be careful not to offend anyone. So please know that if you are a believer, I am not calling you a fool. And if you are a Christian, I am not calling you a fool. And if you are a non-believer who is sympathetic to Christians and Jesus' message of the power of spirituality to transform the world, I am not calling you a fool. And be reassured when I say that being a fool is not something anyone else can just pronounce upon you. It is something you have to earn yourself. Long before the present day, going way back before Jesus' time, the world has scarcely known a time when the dominant culture has not taken advantage of its momentary place atop the social strata to define the rules and punish the most vulnerable. Throughout history, the powerless have been thrown under the bus, cut down, cast out, and subjugated by the rich. Think of who they are: the poor, the disabled, immigrants, women, people of color. All of these people suffer because, really, who will stop it? Who among the oppressed will rise up, go into the den of oppression, face the oppressors, and question their authority? Only a fool. Today is a good day for talking about this. A portion of the Western world celebrates a tiny, barely significant moment, a blip in history when a single man and a few stragglers pulled one over on one of the biggest armies of one of the most dominant empires the world has ever known. Indeed, so subtle was the moment they snatched victory from the jaws of defeat that no one noticed it for nearly 2 days, and then only a few people. To all the world, it appeared the Romans had just completely crushed Jesus, and in that moment, he looked like a fool. But in less than 12 generations, Christianity rose up and became 60% of the Roman Empire. And if you wonder how, then understand it was a miracle of sorts. Jesus died as a man and rose as a community who emulated Jesus' foolishness repeatedly. Christians were the ones who built orphanages, established monasteries for raising and educating smart women. They fed the poor. They honored the outcast. That's a whole lot of foolishness. Years and decades later, when folks bothered to tally up the score, they began to declare victory for the underdogs. And it was definitely a very small band of fools who had the last laugh. So please know that I don't want to diminish Easter. I actually want to expand it. I want to grow more Easter. And it all starts with people who are willing to be fools. So here's where there's good news and bad news. The good news is that we have our very own holiday for training fools. The bad news is that this year it comes the day after Easter. So for those of you who have been thinking of enlisting in this brigade of foolishness, let me give you a crash course in some of what you may learn on April Fool's Day, the high holy day of revelatory fools. There is something you might see like the old cut out the bug in the lamp trick, or the caramel onion, or the air horn under the chair, which don't try this with anyone with a heart condition. Or if you have more time, the unbroken line of shopping carts around the car. And of course, there is the old favorite of painting the soap with clear nail polish. But one of my all-time favorites, adding a few new faces on the wall where they hang the ministers' portraits. But as good as these are, I'm afraid they are not good enough for the Easter revolution that is needed. For what we need today is a wise and holy fool. So let me explain a bit about that. The earliest known historical reference to the tarot is in the mid-15th century, but researchers suspect that it originated about 1,000 years before that. The Fool is one of the 78 cards in the tarot deck. It is the most magical and powerful of the 22 major arcana power cards. It is sometimes numbered 0, first, or 22, the last. However, it is unnumbered in many decks because it is really different from any of the other 21 trump cards and plays a unique role in the game. It is the precursor of the Joker in today's playing cards. The Fool is titled Le Mat in French and Il Matto in Italian tarot decks. These roughly translate as the madman or the beggar, and may be related to the word for checkmate in the original use of tarot games. In the earliest tarot decks, the Fool wore ragged clothes and stockings without shoes and carries a stick on his back. He has feathers in his hair and an unruly beard like a wild man, and he's often chased away by an animal like a dog or a cat who has torn his pants. In the original tarot games, playing the Fool excuses the player from either following suit or playing trump. And at the end of the trick, the player then takes back the Fool card and places it in their own trick pile, along with the most valuable cards from the winner's piles. 100 years after the Fool appeared in tarot, Shakespeare began incorporating this character's special powers to offer commentary in his plays. Nearly every one of Shakespeare's plays had such a character. Dogberry in Much Ado About Nothing, Falstaff in Henry IV, Feste in Twelfth Night, Puck and Nick Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream, the Gravediggers in Hamlet, the Fool in King Lear. These characters were usually clever peasants or commoners who used their wits to outdo people of a higher social standing. They were amazingly popular among what was called groundlings, or those people who were too poor to pay for seats in the theater, so they stood on the ground in front of the stage. But they were also favored by nobility. Most notably, Queen Elizabeth I was a great admirer of the popular actors Richard Tarleton and Robert Armin, who portrayed the majority of Shakespeare's fools. Shakespeare took the tarot fool, which had evolved into the jester, and he retooled it for an elevated purpose. Shakespeare went beyond the purposes of amusement to introduce a sage in disguise, someone who could see through things and reveal the moral complexity that was unfolding. He used them to introduce omens of moral failure and unheeded justice, the moments where we are blind to love. His fools didn't follow any ideology. They rejected all appearance of aristocracy and law and justice and moral order. They pointed out brute force, cruelty, lust, and foreshadowed ignorance and tragedy without pretense. His treatment led Isaac Asimov in his Guide to Shakespeare to say, "The great secret of the successful fool is, of course, that he is no fool at all." And Carl Jung called the fool the precursor to the Savior. Thus, it is the kind of fool that Jesus portrayed, which is to say, sentient and knowing, able to see through things and name them for what they are, willing to expose the foibles and moral failings of the powerful and suggest that humility rather than authority might be the proper prescription. It takes a nearly godlike courage to be so bold, to take such risks and bravely call out those who could, without much effort or thought, simply strike us down, and to walk deep into their lair and say things standing before legions of soldiers with nothing but the truth in your heart to protect you. It is what you and I would consider foolish, and most of us would refuse to consider lest we relish trembling in our own mortality. But Jesus kept this remarkable trump card up his sleeve and used it often to great effect. Jesus spoke in parables using idioms of the day in such a brilliantly paradoxical way, they forced your brain to slam on the brakes and come to a screeching halt, whereupon Jesus would seize the moment of distraction to plant the tiniest of mustard seeds. One of the best illustrations of this screeching to a halt moment comes from dogs, I think. There's a moment when they hear or see something that doesn't quite make sense, but you know you have their attention. And in that magical moment where the world is inexplicably tilted, when what they expect runs counter to what's right in front of them, all their thoughts of certainty slide right out of their head, providing just enough room to plant the tiniest of mustard seeds in the fertile soil of our future, such that it breaks our train of thought, so that that thought might propel them out of old habits of dominance, violence, and control, and into the world of holy foolery that was Jesus' ministry. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which grows into a large tree, allowing birds of the sky to nest in its branches. The goats and the sheep, workers in the vineyard, the prodigal son, the good Samaritan, hundreds of others. Each of these parables has a key that unlocks a moral truth, but it forces you to stop and look through your pockets to see if you have that key. And unless you do, you end up getting locked out and looking foolish yourself. Let me give you a couple examples. From Luke, the parable of being sued for your cloak. Anybody remember that one? If someone sues you and demands your cloak, give him your tunic as well. Most often this is thought of as a call for generosity, giving more than what was asked for. Such was ordinary foolishness. The holy fool, however, knew that if you were paying with your cloak, it meant you had nothing else but the clothes on your back to pay your debts. To give your cloak and your tunic would be to stand naked in public. And when someone outside the courthouse then asked you why you were standing naked, you got to tell them that they sued the pants off of you. Jesus was calling people to expose the ruling class for their greed and turning public opinion against them. Right? Another from Matthew and Luke, the parable of turning the other cheek. You've heard that? If an enemy strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other as well. This is often interpreted as a call for temperance or passive nonviolence, but as a holy fool, Jesus knew the moral code of the day, which gave Roman soldiers the right to backhand a Jew in public, just for being a Jew. And it was demonstration of the social strata, who was on top and who was on the bottom. The person striking was powerful. The person struck, barely even considered human. But the rule was the soldier had to use his right hand and could only backhand the subordinate. To swing with an open hand was dishonorable and put you on the same level as the Jew. It made you equals. So Jesus urged them to turn their other cheek as well, forcing the soldier to either flail with his left hand or use his open right hand, either way making the Jew his equal. This is what Jesus wanted with all of his parables, to make people live equally, to reveal that after all the exploitation and oppression, the subjects enduring the contempt and aggression were the same as the rich and powerful, just human beings with hearts and hopes and dreams. He wanted to call forth courageous foolery, pull back the curtain, hiding the actors and the scripts that keep everything in place, and for once speak creatively and playfully and plainly, to boldly say what was written into the margins. Speak the moral paradox. Those are the fool's lines. The most talented fools are socially and culturally fluid. They can build a wide berth for the vulnerable. They can keep the powerful at bay, exercise Aikido-like maneuvers that turn an oppressor's aggression against them, turn violence into humiliation, suffering into courage and hope. But even Jesus could not subdue the entirety of an empire's malevolence or ego or greed and habitual contempt. He had them off balance for quite some time, but when they regained their footing, they struck swiftly and without mercy. Longevity is not the aim of a fool, nor is notoriety, and certainly not convenience or comfort. If these are the things you find yourself craving, then the pantheon of holy fools is not where you want to place your application for employment, which is too bad, because that's what the world really needs. And ironically, it's exactly what we need to feel fully alive. Whether we are part of the dominant culture or whether we live in the margins, whether we're mad as hell or cavalier and complacent, when the rich profit off the suffering of the poor, when lawmakers withhold policy that saves lives at the border so that they just can have talking points in the upcoming election, when women's choices are made by men parading their moral pugnacity, then we all look like fools for abiding in and perpetuating a system that refuses our common humanity. That's what Jesus knew. That's what we all really know at heart. We don't need to take down the empire all by ourselves. We just need enough foolery, enough courage and creativity and compassion and conscience to ask the right questions in the right moment so that the whole thing stops just long enough to plant a few mustard seeds. What kind of foolery can we be part of that might resurrect big joy from under the boot of oppression? What foolhardiness could, in less than 12 generations, rise in the majority of hearts of this nation and this world so as to restore the worth of the poor, the dignity of the disabled and the immigrants, the brilliance of women, and the wisdom of the outcast? One example of the foolery needed today is that besides Easter being celebrated today, it is also Transgender Day of Visibility. The GOP are accusing Biden of being a fool to allow that to happen, but frankly, I don't give Biden that much credit. It's just the kind of thing that Jesus would have done, so I figure he must be behind it. Friends, we cannot wait for April Fool's Day. The need for a band of holy fools has never been greater. It is not an easy job. Bumps and bruises are assured, and the pay is literally a joke. Still, the work is not without its rewards. The view from the cliff is extraordinary, and the company divine. And who doesn't want to journey in a cloud of laughter? And ask yourselves what on your full agenda is so much more important. You know you want to join this merry band. Here is your badge. Commence. Happy Easter.